Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for visiting me again on this channel. I know you probably saw me from my last video with the Gloria Alvarado case. Well, today I have a new case to bring you. It's also unsolved, and it was recently mentioned on the Unsolved Mysteries, which is a show on Netflix. So I binge watched the entire show, and this episode really made me intrigued, so I really wanted to do my own research on the case because that episode did leave out quite a bit of really important, substantial things. So let's get into the case and hope you enjoy this one. Okay, so the case I'll be telling you about today is one of Joann Romain. So a bit of a background on Joann. She's a very social, outgoing person. Ever since now, even back then when she was a child, she's really extravagant. She always has friends over. Even back in the day with her children when they were young, their house would always be the house where everything was always held at. So that can give you a really good perspective on what she's like. She was born into a family where their business really took off, and again, when the parents died, there was a really kind of bad family dispute over $20 million. Their business, which can honestly still be seen today, is called Wholesale Fine Wine and Spirits. So it's you probably haven't heard of it, but it is very popular, does very well. Joann was a very devoted Catholic, and she's just in general a really family and wholehearted person. So on January 12th, 2010, Joann Romain was going out for a night, and she decided to stop by her local church and go to a prayer service at 7 p.m. Usually this happens about a couple times a week. It's not odd at all for Joann to go to this church. So it's 7 p.m. and she decides to show up over there, and there's about 10 to 15 people at the service who all remember seeing her there. Joann's car was found abandoned in the parking lot at around 10 o'clock p.m. by a police officer. Inside her car were her purse with her wallet and some money inside, but her cell phone and her rosary were all missing. Her car was found in the parking lot, which is very close to Lake St. Clair, which is a lake right behind the church. So it can be accessible by, think of the parking lot, a road, a median, a road again, and then a very steep embankment down to the lake. So the lake's only about 2 to 4 feet deep, and since this was January, it was definitely covered with some heavy ice, pretty thick ice, but not completely coated over. So again, for somebody to go into this lake, it's a bit psychotic. So the police officer found some footsteps leading down, only near the embankment, noting that there were no footsteps leading from the car to the lake. It was only in the embankment were there footsteps. So again, this is something to keep in mind, as why did he randomly decide to check near the lake when there were no signs of footsteps leading towards the embankment? There were no footsteps found returning back. So to describe the scene a little bit, I'll add in some pictures, but it was basically some footsteps and kind of somebody like almost sat down and maybe scooted a little bit. It was all leading towards the water, quite a bit of drag marks in my opinion. So a very interesting scene, definitely one to think it would be suicide, but again, you cannot completely rule out homicide either. Going back in time a little bit, this is really where some things get interesting. So the police actually showed up at Joann's house, which she lived with her family, at 9:30 p.m. and given her car was found at 10 o'clock p.m., this is a bit of a stretch for this timeline, very confusing here. So immediately when the police showed up to the house and told Michelle, Joann's daughter, that her mother was missing, Michelle immediately found two things very discerning and very odd right away. Michelle immediately picked up on that the police showed up 30 minutes before her mother was officially declared missing, and they had not even declared her mother missing in the first place. So how did they just immediately come to the fact that she was missing? Maybe they could have thought that she just had a ride from a stranger or just walked off. Why did they immediately assume she was missing? One thing that the Netflix episode did not pick up on was that the car that Joann was driving is actually registered to her daughter Michelle. So when they find the car in the parking lot and run the plate, it would have shown Michelle's name and they would have figured, oh, Michelle's missing. But no, they immediately knew that Joann was missing. So this is just really weird police work here, and this leads me to think definitely some sort of inside information or cover-up was immediately happening. Another thing with the timeline is that the Coast Guard actually got a call 30 minutes before Joann's car was found. So again, this huge gap in time. So not only did the police show up to Joann's house at 9:30, but the Coast Guard got a call at 9:30. So everything's happening before she officially got declared missing. The scene was immediately ruled a suicide by the Grosse Pointe Police Department without any sort of further investigation. They just saw the evidence, they saw the footsteps, and they thought suicide right away. But again, it may look like one, but it can also not be a suicide. They thought that this was a suicide because he said that there were no car ransack, no scuff marks, no drag marks, no blood, bullet casings, or any type of evidence that would indicate a crime had occurred. As you know, looking at the scene, it may look like a suicide. Police really just did not do their job here. They did not look back in time. They did not bother to do any sort of further investigation. They just called it a suicide and case open, case closed for them. But a few things to keep in mind that on that night, Joann was wearing 4-inch black high heels. So how would she go down a really steep embankment to this lake and walk that far in high heels? And she was not in the right physical condition to do this at all. And plus, this was a cold January night and the water's only 2 to 4 feet deep. She would have to walk 2 football fields out to eventually drown herself, which is so long. And she's wearing all black this night, so somebody probably would have seen her. And if they didn't, then basically somebody would have seen her body floating eventually. So also, Joann's daughter noted how she really was a really cautious person. She disliked water, and just in general, none of this makes sense for her character. And also, she was a Catholic, so killing herself would be completely against her faith. Michelle hired 2 private investigators to do the work that the police refused to do. Bill Randall and Salvatore Ostrelli wholeheartedly believe that Joann did not commit suicide based on all the evidence seen at the scene. So Bill Randall, one of the private investigators, decided to pull up some of Joann's phone records. He found out that a week before she went missing, Joann actually went to a security company and was calling for some security measurements to be put in place for her home. So bringing this up to her family, they soon realized that this is not unlike their mother at all. And they also realized that, you know, she has been acting a bit unsure and nervous the last couple of weeks. She actually told her family that she thought somebody was following her, or several people at once. Joann thought that her phone was being hacked or tapped in some way. She also thought that somebody was intercepting her mail as well. She did not feel safe alone, and she definitely thought that something was going on behind the scenes. And of course, her behavior, her family, and actually co-workers noticed this as well. They noticed that Joann got more calls, and instead of talking to this person inside the boutique she worked at, she would actually head outside and have pretty long, interesting conversations with this person, unknown. Bill started doing more of the work the police refused to do, and some witnesses actually came forward that night. So some people that were at the church service had a few really important things to know. So one witness heard a panic alarm on the car. So that would obviously be such a huge thing, because knowing that she could have been walking out to her car and she could have hit the panic alarm as soon as somebody actually started attacking her. Another witness came forward at about 7:30 p.m. and she really was the last one in the parking lot, and she hated leaving by herself all at dark. So she did notice that, looking back and forth around the parking lot, that it was completely empty. And this was at 7:30. So that means somebody took Joann's car out of the parking lot and then returned it at 10 o'clock p.m. where it was found later. So at 7:50 p.m., a witness had really important thing to say. So, like I said, at 7:50, a witness saw a man running along the lake with a scarf on. He was running along the lake at 7:50 p.m. Don't know what that is, but obviously I think that's connected to Joann. So police actually found this scarf at the scene, but instead of, DNA testing it or keeping it as evidence, they decided to give it away for charity. So, they do not give a care at all for this. So this is just really disheartening, because they didn't do any DNA tests on anything. They didn't do it on her purse. They didn't do it on the scarf. They didn't even consider, they said that they did some fingertip swabs at the scene, but they had no usable prints. So this likely means they had a partial print, but no usable ones, according to them. So this, in my mind, is a straight up cover up at the police department. On March 20th, 2010, this is quite a while later from back when she went missing in January, Joann's body was actually found by fishermen near Bobo Island, which is in the Detroit River, which, take this, is 35 miles away from where she was found. So this is absolutely crazy. A body coming from one part 35 miles down a river. I don't know how fast that current has to be, which by many water experts in the area said that the current was not fast at all. How did her body travel 35 miles downstream? That's just completely out of realm. So looking at Joann's body, this is some really important things to keep in mind. So all of her clothes were on, they were all on her, and they were actually all zipped up with her car keys found inside one of the pockets zipped up. Her boots, which this is so important, her boots were not bothered or scuffed up at all. So if the police are to say that she walked down this steep embankment in snow and walked across this, like, you know, rocky lake, how are her shoes not even touched at all? They look brand new out of the box. So that's crazy. And then her phone and her rosary were still not found. And really important evidence is that on her left arm, where she carried her purse, there were 2 bruises on it. Joann was already in pretty advanced decomposition when her body was found. She had gray and brown algae stuck to her, and actually some zebra mussels stuck to the lower half of her body, which is disgusting to think about. And one thing, again, very important, is that she actually suffered from dry drowning, so no water was found in her lungs. Let's talk about some theories and suspects. So the first theory is probably the one that happened, I wouldn't even call it a theory, is that Joann was attacked while coming out of her church by 1 man or 2 and shoved into her car, and they drove it away, killed her on a separate location, and dumped her body 35 miles in the river. And they, you know, made the scene look like a suicide, and again, this was probably a police cover-up. The first suspect in this case is David Romain, her ex-husband, which she divorced with. So the only thing people consider him is because he was really angry when she left him, but besides that, there's nothing else to indicate that he was involved with this at all. So I just put this on here because, again, people always like to point to the spouse or ex-spouse. So again, there's nothing to indicate it, but something to keep in mind. So the second suspect is her brother, John Matouk. So he tried to have his own business, but he was a failed entrepreneur. He ran this business and really started getting into debt and gambling, and people say that he got into some business, got into some beef with somebody, and they killed Joann to get back at him. John even supports this theory himself. He says that it is entirely plausible that somebody could have really gotten back at him and killed his sister. Again, this is pretty, I wouldn't rule it out at all. But when you hear this next suspect, I don't know, that's just thrown out the window for me. The final suspect is Tim Matouk. And this one, this is really obvious for me, but again, the police refuse to say it was him. So Tim Matouk is her cousin and a cop. He's a police officer. So the lawsuit between the siblings over the $20 million got really heated between Joann and Tim. So one day he called her because Joann, I guess, told people that, oh, Tim is the issue for all of John's problems. So he got really mad at Joann and called her. And Michelle remembers screaming and hearing Joann saying to Tim over the phone, how did you call me? How did you get my number? And basically she said to Michelle, if something ever happens to me, look at Tim. So just, wow. Whenever you hear somebody say that, I don't know why haven't any arrests been made yet. But if you think about it logically, he's a cop. He was completely involved in this cover-up at the police department. I mean, it's really hard to just get rid of a police cover-up theory, because looking at all the timelines, looking that her cousin was a police officer, it's just entirely plausible this is what happened. So this is everything for the case so far. Again, this happened in 2010. There hasn't been any major updates as of now, except that more people are talking about the case because Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix picked up on it. And I've listened to several podcasts and other, media sources that are really talking about this case more, which is a good thing because it seems so obvious that it was Tim or the police department. Really, they're all wrapped up in this. But again, because of the corrupt system, nothing's happening. So I just wanted to say that my heart truly goes out to Joann and her family and just everything that happened and all the stress and trauma that they have to go through because of this and because the police department won't cooperate at all. So thank you very much for watching this video. I put tons of work and research into this case as it's a really long one, but I hope you guys like this unsolved case and I hope you guys really come back for the next video. So comment down below what you think of this and how mad you are because of the police department. So I'll see you next time. Bye.